Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 181, The Last Question. Dialectical competition. The representatives from the various schools sat in their seats. The representatives from each school took turns to ask questions. The representatives from the other schools had a certain amount of time to think and answer. In the end, the judges would issue points according to the students' answers. This was the situation in the past. But now, the team leader of a representative team stood up and asked, "Our question is, if a three-tailed fox has already evolved into an ice six tails, is there any way to let it step into other evolution pathways, such as becoming a sword six tails, flaming six tails, etc.?" Su Hao was rendered speechless. This question was similar to asking if sprites could degenerate after evolution. It was a difficult question of the century that sprite cultivators had been researching for a long time but still had no leads on. If he asked here, it could only be said that high school possessed no reliable questions. Representatives abstained one after another, indicating that they couldn't answer. The masters and specialists sitting in the guest seats, well-known high-level sprite cultivators, were often called specialists by others, but they couldn't answer this question either. They simply explained the relationship between evolution, genes, form, growth rates, and so on. Su Hao received intelligence points +1. As expected, there's basically no chance of getting points in the dialectical match. It's impossible to surpass it. But it's pretty good to be able to more or less gain some intelligence points. Even if there was a chance to score, Su Hao felt that it wouldn't be his turn. He already had a clear understanding of his own standards. In terms of scope and foundation, it was slightly inferior to high-level sprite cultivators. He only had an advantage in a few aspects such as sprite observation and partial attribute jade powder mix. At most, it was 50-50 against an ordinary high-level sprite cultivator. It was far inferior to specialist sprite cultivators. And in the dialectical competition, there were many strange questions that even masters couldn't answer. What could he do? He could only gain some intelligence points for free. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 5 questions had already been asked. 4 were similarly difficult questions of the century, but were quickly skipped. Another question with a 5.5 difficulty score was answered by someone from Dragon City University's team, and they scored 2 points. Dragon City University, 40 points. Whale Island University, 31 points. The huge difference made Su Hao even more dreadful. Just lie down and end it, getting the second place reward wasn't that bad anymore. He placed his hand on the table and listened to the questions raised by Yunhua University. Our research discovered that the wood mantis has a second evolution pathway. Its development direction is very likely completely different from the killer mantis. What we want to ask now is, according to this genetic analysis map, which direction could the second pathway of the wood mantis possibly developing towards? The same time the team leader of Yunhua University asked the question, the sequence hidden in the wood mantis genes was shown on the big screen. And some brief information. Yunhua University wouldn't disclose detailed and confidential information here. But just this alone had already attracted the interest of the masters and experts present. Looking at the information, they showed thoughtful looks. Many sleepy students suddenly became energetic and looked up. Su Hao also looked over. Logically speaking, it was also very difficult for him to understand genetic analysis patterns, instructions, and so on. Lin Sui-Guang, who was beside, barely understood. He frowned and kept thinking. But Su Hao knew the answer. Looking at it this way. Whoa, there were still some mistakes in the analysis of data from Yunhua University. He had a strange look on his face. He didn't know how to explain it. Junior Su Hao, do you have an idea? Lin Sui-Guang saw his expression. Just say whatever you have in mind. As long as you can match a little, you can get 1 to 2 points. Su Hao said casually, in the past, I did research about the wood mantis for a while. He touched his chin, thinking and organizing his words in his mind. What should be said in order to make it seem reasonable and not reveal key information? It was very difficult. A moment later, he pressed the answer button. The second pathway of the wood mantis, according to, and, very likely not a purely physical attack type. I think that when it develops till the end, it may possess dual attributes. According to my deduction, the other attribute that is most likely to appear is light, thought, or illusion. Its growth potential is undoubtedly higher than the first pathway. Evolution conditions should also be set in terms of affinity and other aspects. But the difficult part actually laid in the materials. Unorthodox. Even so, many masters and experts still nodded slightly. Su Hao took a look and felt that there was no need to add anything more. The second evolution of the wood mantis pathway hadn't been discovered yet. No one knew whether what he said was true or false. The key was in his logic. He had to be able to convince the masters and experts present to let them feel that his deduction was feasible. Saying too much would in turn be unreasonable. I didn't perform any concrete experiments on some details, and I don't have a wood mantis sprite, so I shouldn't know. The pathway to prayer mantis. I still wanted to keep it for myself to write my research paper. That was why he wanted a personal laboratory. Without a laboratory, he couldn't adopt and research wild sprites. Only by cultivating a prayer mantis and having sufficient experiment proof could he write a complete paper. It wasn't like back then when he could only write a crude paper due to the restrictions. Most of the judges agreed with Su Hao's answer, and they all gave him pretty high marks. In the end, 9.5 marks, impressive, Junior Su. Lin Suiguang exclaimed. Originally, they were 9 marks lower than Dragon City University, a gap that was almost impossible to catch up to, but Su Hao successfully overtook them with just a few words. They were surprised. The members of Dragon City University were shocked. The masters and experts on the stage were even quietly asking about Su Hao's identity. Whale Island University. I've never heard of such a genius. The contest continued. From the morning to the afternoon. Dragon City University got another 1.2 points, but Lin Suiguang also got 1 point on a certain issue. Finally, the time was up. The only one that hadn't raised any questions was Dragon City University. But they couldn't answer their school's questions. We won. The freckled girl, the lanky boy, the chubby girl, and the other students were all overjoyed. One lying down? Winning lying down was also winning. In the future, they could proudly say that Whale Island University won the championship in the batch they participated in. That was awesome when written on their resume. Li Hongzhou, the team leader of Dragon City University, was a little disappointed, but he still asked the question they had prepared. Our question is, if a sprite's spiritual force can be solidified, then, can spirit power that can be released be solidified? More than a decade ago, the team from Dragon City University discovered a way to solidify spiritual force. From then on, Dragon Nation's use of spiritual force became even more advanced. And today, they were researching the solidification of spirit power. If they succeeded, the significance would be similarly great. But spirit power was more elusive than spiritual force, so their research progress was slow. They needed to find inspiration and breakthrough points from other sprite cultivators. Su Hao looked at the fairy snail on the field. Tiny beads flew out of the screws. It made crisp sounds when it landed on the ground. Like glass beads. It wasn't water turning into ice, but the purest spiritual force pearl after solidification. It can be used as a storage device to store spiritual force that is usually not used. When the battle starts, it can then extract spiritual force to replenish itself. That was the most basic usage. But the difficulty of mastering it was also very high. Extraordinary level was the basic requirement. Solidifying spirit power? That was even harder. Even the spirit power training method of Dragon Nation was very simple and crude in itself. Many sprites' spirit power still increased naturally on their own. Unless one is as gifted as Butterfly and has a unique sprite trainer like myself, even if they research solidification methods, most sprites would find it difficult to master them. He thought, and listened to the discussions of the masters and experts. Suddenly, he opened the interface, and his gaze landed on a certain line on it. He was stunned on the spot. Chapter 182, Secret Manual, Spiritual Orb. Sprite, Reverie Butterfly, Elite. Information, omitted. Characteristics, omitted. Unique skill, omitted. Cultivation plan, omitted. Special. 1. Stable dream scene. 2. 5 senses control. 3. Spiritual orb, unlock with 21 intelligence points. So how? He rubbed his eyes to make sure that he wasn't mistaken. He opened the information on sprites such as Flaming Cloud Crow and browsed from the front page to the end. Why not? Is it because they aren't here? Or? He saw that the masters were discussing. After thinking about it, he reached under the table and spread his fingers. He summoned the Flaming Cloud Crow with the smallest movement. Squawk! Before the confused Flaming Cloud Crow could make a crow's cry, it was pressed down by him. It was immediately even more confused. Who am I? Where am I? Why did Su Hao call me over? At this moment, Su Hao was staring at the interface. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The option of spiritual orb still didn't appear in the Flaming Cloud Crow's information. In that case, only Reverie Butterfly can meet the unlocking conditions. Even if other sprites mastered the method, they wouldn't be able to cultivate a spiritual orb? What exactly is that spiritual orb? 21 intelligence points, no discount at all. Su Hao didn't unlock it right away, but chose to pay in installments. He used 1 intelligence point to unlock the simple information of spiritual orb. Spiritual orb, the orb produced by Reverie Butterfly's materialized spirit power. It has the ability to store spirit power and increase the power of illusion-type unique skills. It can also be used as a weapon for attack. I see. One of them used a technique to solidify spirit power, but not all. It was extended according to the technique, the most suitable special secret manual for Reverie Butterfly. Su Hao had never been able to find a secret manual suitable for Butterfly. If this went on, when Flaming Cloud Crow evolved first, its battle power would very likely surpass that of Reverie Butterfly. Actually, it wasn't that far off now. Butterfly was already at a disadvantage in a one-on-one battle. Even if it learned Spiritual Explosion, it couldn't make up for the disadvantage in a frontal battle. Of course, in the team battle, Butterfly was the absolute core. But the secret manual of the spiritual orb can undoubtedly greatly increase the little rascal's frontal combat ability. He was greedy. Too greedy. But he didn't unlock it immediately. He continued to listen intently to the discussions of the masters. 1 hour, 2 hours. Dragon City University asked the last questions, and they were also very hot topics. Neither the instructors nor the judges of the various schools were willing to leave the venue. Just like that, they started discussing how to solidify spirit powers. In the end, it became a dialectic. Many masters and experts looked like they wanted to PK in person. Su Hao listened intently. It was just that some words couldn't be heard clearly. The masters were arguing too wildly and forgetting themselves, but fortunately, there was Butterfly, whose hearing was much better than his. Su Hao got Butterfly to convey it to him. Gurgle. Gurgle. Gurgle, gurgle. It had it too difficult. What should this stupid Su Hao do without it? Flaming Cloud Crow followed and nodded. 2 hours later. The intelligence points prompt sounded in Su Hao's ears already had 3 + 1s. Then, he took a look at the intelligence points needed for unlocking the spiritual orb. It had also dropped from 20 to 18. This was equivalent to him earning 5 points. Sure. Most of the students couldn't understand. Unable to sit still, they used the bathroom to escape. But Su Hao held back. He didn't want to leave for half a minute, so he could only let his bladder suffer. It was to hear more valuable information. But he still didn't understand most of it. He felt a little dizzy. Slowly, the dim yellow sunlight shone through the window. It was sunset. The many masters and experts who had discussed for half an afternoon were also somewhat parched. There wasn't much time left. Su Hao opened the interface and closed it again. It opened and closed again. In the end, he couldn't hold himself back and unlocked the spiritual orb. Buzz. The content unlocked with 18 intelligence points flowed into his mind like a tide. The noisy voices seemed to disappear in an instant. Su Hao held his forehead with his hand and slowly digested the information that he had just unlocked. Spirit powers solidified. The orb took form. Training and usage. Wait. The amount of information was comparable to a thick textbook, instilling it all into him. Su Hao understood. The voices around him gradually became clearer. He actually understood more than half of the content discussed by the masters on the stage. That train of thought isn't right. He really wanted to say this, opening and closing his mouth. Then, he looked at Reverie Butterfly. Do you want a cheat code? Gurgle. Su Hao took out a pen and paper and started writing. It's similar to the method of leaving a mark when you use your spiritual explosion. Then, you first put on a spiritual force barrier, and then this, and this. Constructing a spiritual orb was very difficult. It was even difficult to express it clearly in words alone. With the help of contract transmitting information, it still took Su Hao several minutes to finish explaining the general points. As Butterfly listened, its big eyes gradually became surprised. Su Hao became smarter. Gurgle. Can it be done? Gurgle. You are making things difficult for Butterfly. Well, Su Hao held his chin. It's indeed unrealistic to want you to master it at once, but... He looked at the freckled girl at the side and said, Student, can you buy me a few crystal balls to train spirit powers with? I'll transfer the money to you. Oh, okay. The freckled girl looked down at the ghost-like drawing blueprint. She didn't understand, but she admired his excellence. She agreed right away. She hurriedly ran out. Lin Suiguang and the others wanted to ask, but seeing how busy Su Hao was, they didn't dare to. It was so uncomfortable. 2 minutes later, the freckled girl returned. She bought 10 crystal balls from the convenience store outside the venue. They were the size of a fist. They were sparkling. Butterfly injected spirit power, and the crystal ball glowed slightly and slowly floated up. It continued to stand on the table and watch Su Hao write and draw. It nodded from time to time, as though it had understood something. 10 minutes later, Butterfly started fiddling with the crystal ball and experimenting with the method Su Hao gave it. The crystal ball floated in front of it for a few minutes. Suddenly, crack! The ball broke. Butterfly changed to another one and continued to try. The second, third. After shattering 5 crystal balls, there were finally no more accidents. Su Hao looked over. He could vaguely see a small glass bead inside the ball. It was bright white. He looked around and picked up the flaming cloud crow by its feet. Cut open this ball, gently. Squawk! Squawk! Flaming cloud crow stretched out its wings and gestured to estimate how to cut it. Then, slash! It gently cut open the surface of the ball, and the glass ball inside immediately flew out. Gurgle! Lin Suiguang, the freckled girl, the tall and thin boy, and the other classmates held their breaths and watched in confusion. When they saw this bright white glass bead fly out, all their pupils constricted, and a crazy idea emerged in their minds. Could it be? Su Hao didn't answer. He reached out and touched this bead. It was hard and had a similar texture to ordinary glass beads. He reached out to grab it again, but he didn't use any strength. Bang! The whole glass ball broke, the fragments scattered, and in the blink of an eye, turned into light particles and dissipated. But because its nature had already changed, there was no shock wave spreading. It was like an ordinary glass bead shattering, just that it didn't leave any traces. Su Hao was rendered speechless. He turned around and saw Butterfly glaring at him with an unfriendly expression. On the guest seats. The nature of spirit power is too illusory, one should fuse spiritual force and spirit power. For example, unique skills such as psychic shock and psychic shield are formed by fusing two types of power. No, solidified energy must be pure in order to be used as a battery. I think it's all right. I don't think so. Just because you think. An elderly sprite cultivator was fuming. Suddenly, he was stunned. His eyes were really about to pop out. The sprite cultivator opposite him was stunned. He also turned to look and saw. A bright white glass bead floated in front of a reverie butterfly. Someone touched it with his finger and held it. The bright white glass bead shattered with a bang. Countless fragments flew away and eventually turned into pure light particles that dissipated. The sprite cultivator's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but punch down. Bang! Chapter 183, It's all because I'm talented and hardworking. The spiritual orb couldn't be cultivated in a day. That bright white little glass pearl was still very weak at the moment. It was so weak that it disappeared inch by inch in the eyes of the two master sprite cultivators. Old Wang, did you see that clearly? The master sprite cultivator, whose neck was almost twisted 90 degrees, asked. The other one, Old Wang, who had a beard, was still maintaining his appearance with his eyeballs protruding outward. He slowed down and replayed the scene he had just seen in his mind. After a while, he said, it's not a solidification of spiritual force. It's hard to say whether it's a solidification of spirit power. But no matter what, that reverie butterfly is only elite level. Hey, old Lu, wait a minute. Before old Wang finished speaking, he saw old Lu leaping out with agility that didn't match his age, heading straight for the reverie butterfly. Old Lu, you hypocrite! He also jumped over the guest judge's table and ran over. At this moment, Su Hao coughed dryly. Then, another ball. Gurgle. No more, no more. With experience, Butterfly was already familiar with it the second time. In just slightly more than half a minute, it used the crystal ball to construct a spiritual orb inside. It was bright and white, and could be seen through the crystal ball. The mature flaming cloud crow didn't need any instructions as it stretched out its feather blade. With a whoosh, it cut neatly at a third of the crystal ball. The spiritual orb flew out and circled around Butterfly's small body twice before stopping in front of it. It floated quietly in midair, without any power dissipating, like an ordinary white glass bead. But the quality of the orb was transparent, like top-grade jadeite. Butterfly stared at it a few times and felt very satisfied. It was obviously very valuable. Gurgle. At this moment, a finger reached over and poked the white glass bead. The bead shook. Butterfly was just about to drag the bead away when another person's finger poked over. It poked and prodded. Crack! The transparent bead cracked, and in the next second, it shattered with a bang. It was like glass shards falling to the ground, then vaporizing and disappearing. Gurgle! 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 Su Hao raised his hands. I didn't poke it. Butterfly turned its head and widened its eyes, discovering two old men with grey hair beside it. They were smiling awkwardly. I really couldn't help it. The master sprite cultivator surnamed Wang felt that he was in the wrong, but he couldn't control his immense thirst for knowledge. It's spirit power solidification, right? After saying that, he patted his head again. He felt like he was stupid. He was actually asking a sprite? Master Wang turned to look at Su Hao again. His gaze was burning. The other Master Lu was the same. Su Hao pondered for a moment. Probably. He added, after listening to the discussions of the masters just now, I had some inspiration. Then, I let the sprite try it, and then. So I'm not too sure. Master Wang. Master Lu. Master Yao, who had just run over a difficult problem that many masters discussed but had no results, you came up with it just by trying? What luck! What talent! Master Yao's gaze moved down and saw the papers on the table. And the complicated, messy, and ghost-like drafts drawn on them. But he understood a little. That's. After Su Hao expressed that he didn't have any questions, Master Yao picked up the papers. Master Wang and Master Lu came over. 10 minutes later. Master and experts had already surrounded Whale Island University's representative team. Lin Sui Wang, the freckled girl, and the others were pitifully pushed to the periphery. They couldn't understand anyway. Numerous middle-aged, grandparent-age figures in the Dragon Nation's Sprite cultivator circle held Su Hao's drafts as if they were holding precious treasures. Their faces were filled with excitement. From time to time, expressions of realization appeared on their faces. Yes, that's it. I see, it's using pure spirit powers to stack them layer by layer. This is indeed possible. Student, let your sprite demonstrate again. I have a marrow jade here that can nurture and recover spirit power. I'm giving it to your sprite. I also have treasures that can replenish spirit power without side effects. Wearing this will help stabilize the release of spirit power. Finished using the crystal balls? Little Chen, quick, buy a box for me. Today was the day that Butterfly had received the most gifts. Since there were so many gifts for itself, it made nothing of the trouble of continuing to demonstrate the secret manual of the spiritual orb. Su Hao was on the side, providing additional information. He also spoke from time to time. I think it can be done this way. The orb will shrink a little more. This meant that he was also constantly learning and improving. Countless masters and experts nodded continuously. In just this short while, the number of times they nodded was even more than the whole Sprite Cultivator Cup. I didn't expect that the problem that had troubled us for more than a year was actually solved by a freshman. Master Zhuang from Dragon City University had a complicated expression. In his estimation, it was probably the Sprite Cultivator Cup that had brought him some inspiration. If everything went well, perhaps in another half a year or a year, he would be able to develop a complete spirit power consolidation method. But why? Why did it become like this? Why didn't he himself think of this idea? Master Zhuang fell into deep thought. At night, at 8 in the hotel. Su Hao finally had a hot dinner. It wasn't easy. Gurgle. Butterfly nodded. Those old men were too scary. But it then looked at the marrow jade, necklaces, and other items on its body, and its big eyes became. Master Yao was eating his dinner. He was still thinking about problems in his mind. Suddenly, he looked up at Su Hao. The train of thought of solidifying spirit power is already very clear. For safety reasons, you should publish the paper as soon as possible. Of course, he added, there are quite a lot of witnesses today. I don't think anyone would snatch your results, but just in case. Master Yao said. He stared straight at Su Hao, wanting to know what was in his head. That could actually make him shine so brightly, and have such a clear thought process. As expected of the student he took a fancy to. He had both talent and definitely had committed with countless sweat. My Whale Island University's Sprite Care School can finally rise magnificently. After dinner, Su Hao returned to his room and planned to start typing on the research paper. It wasn't that urgent. With just a few drafts and Butterfly's demonstration, he could at most understand the train of thought. The real secret was still in his mind. In a short period of time, no one else could crack it. He couldn't run away from the #1 contributor of his spirit power consolidation research. Dragon City University's team could only come in second. That's true, because the spiritual orb is a secret manual that completely suits the little rascal. It's easy to use it, but it'll be a bit troublesome for me to change it to a paper. Su Hao had to extract some of the key points and modify them into the spirit power solidification method that was universally suitable. It was very troublesome. It was a lot of work. It will probably take a few days. Chapter 184, Returning to School. Su Hao stayed in Sprite Care Village for the time being. On the 5th day after the end of the Sprite Cultivator Cup, he finally finished typing the paper. It was uploaded onto the Union's intranet. I feel like I finally completed my homework. He stretched and looked at Reverie Butterfly. The little rascal had also been very concerned about the secret manual training in the past few days. It constantly constructed spiritual orbs. In the beginning, even if the orb it constructed wasn't disturbed by external forces, it could only last for an hour or two. This meant that its mastery of the solidification method was insufficient. But today, gurgle. In front of Butterfly, a white, translucent, and colorful bead revolved around it. Under its control, the glass bead hit the floor, producing a crisp sound. But the bead was intact. Gurgle. Su Hao squatted and pinched it with 2 fingers. It felt cold to the touch. How do you feel? Gurgle. At most, it can store 20% of spirit power. The power of the illusion element unique skill is increased by 10%, the strength of the thought system is slightly increased, and the strength of spirit power is also slightly increased. Not bad at all. Su Hao touched his chin. 1 spiritual orb wasn't the little rascal's limit. As long as it was familiar, it could stabilize 3 spiritual orbs. It could store 60% spirit power, and the illusion unique skill could increase 30%. The improvement was already very great. The spiritual orb can also be used as a weapon attack, and even, can self-destruct at critical moments. It was too functional. Try. He looked at Reverie Butterfly. It controlled the orb to fly in the room. Shoo, 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 its speed was much faster than before. But when it hit a wall, the orb stopped. Gurgle. It said that it couldn't bear to hit it directly. It felt like it would shatter. Gurgle. All right, you can try again after you've completely stabilized the pearl in the future. It's indeed not good to experiment in a hotel. If anything is broken, we still have to compensate. Gurgle. Butterfly nodded. Su Hao could teach them. 5 days. Most of the school representatives had already returned. Only a small number of people remained in the Sprite Care Village. Su Hao was one of them. At lunch, Master Yao walked over in big strides and said the news he wanted to hear the most. The matter of the personal laboratory has been confirmed. You completely meet the requirements. You can apply for an interest-free loan. But you have to have a plan. Otherwise, the annual maintenance cost of a laboratory isn't low. Apart from that, you also have to understand the land, equipment, personnel, and other early-phase investments needed for a laboratory. You can only get the loan after making a thorough calculation. Also, when choosing the location, you have to fight for local policy benefits. I'll give you my assistant's number later. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask him. Thank you, instructor. Su Hao really didn't know so much. He even felt a little dizzy listening to it. In addition, Master Yao said again, the school has the intention to invest in your laboratory. The bank funds can only be used on laboratory construction. The subsequent maintenance and experiment expenses are still quite high. Apart from that, the school can also provide you with some information and connections. You can consider it. Su Hao expressed that he would. Over the past few days, there were quite a lot of masters and experts who had extended an olive branch to him. There were also many people who wanted to invest in his laboratory. But it was impossible for him to agree. You can slowly accumulate connections. There doesn't seem to be a lack of experiments. For example, he needed to experiment with the wood mantis's evolution research. But the experiments of others were exploration in the dark. He was deducing based on the answers, collecting relevant data, and providing the thesis with sufficient theoretical support. It was different. Therefore, he had to have full control over the laboratory before he could do anything. No matter how poor or bitter, he couldn't let others invest in it. But some friendly sponsors. For example, a Sprite cultivator said that he could gift him 10 wood mantis. After the laboratory is completed, we can first create the evolutionary paper of prayer mantis. Then, we can conduct some experiments on the jade powder set meal and make it suitable for sale. Su Hao thought about it. I don't lack money or information, but I lack people. Even if it was a small-scale laboratory, it needed a high-level Sprite cultivator and a few assistants. It was a personal laboratory, he had to get security. If he wanted to register a company, he would need a professional manager to manage it. That would be even more troublesome. And these? He didn't know any of them. It's too difficult for me. At the side, Lin Suiguang was very shocked that Junior Su had owned a personal laboratory at such a young age. When he heard this, a big question mark appeared on his forehead. What's so difficult for you? For the sake of building his personal laboratory, Su Hao was so busy that his feet didn't touch the ground. The final location of the laboratory was set at a county city under Yunhua City, very close to An City. Then, laboratory construction plans. Plan design. Construction unit selection. Floor plan design. The design for the electricity, air conditioning, fire control, drainage, and so on. Buying equipments. Renovation. And so on, planning. He made a list. Half a month later. I'm finally done. Su Hao felt that he was probably crippled. Then, he looked at the to-do list in his hand. Well, about 200 million yuan. Many equipment related to Sprites cost at least 10 million yuan each. It's too damn expensive. For a moment, he wondered if he could recoup his losses. After applying for a loan, it would still take some time before the construction started. Fortunately, someone as young and promising as him, wasn't the first to start building a laboratory during his university days. There was already a process for reference. Su Hao didn't need to monitor it himself. He flew back to Whale Island University. I'm finally back. Gurgle. Butterfly nodded fervently. After accompanying Su Hao for so long, it had it too difficult. If I had known earlier, I would have handed the mission to Dazed Crow. Gurgle. I'm giving you a holiday. Call Flaming Cloud Crow and the others over. Gurgle. Oh yeah, I forgot about the summoning. Gurgle, _. He was rather satisfied that he didn't see the Flaming Cloud Crow and other sprites in the villa. Su Hao rested for a while. About an hour or two later, he came to the training area and opened a venue. He spread his fingers and summoned the 3 sprites, Flaming Cloud Crow, Water Unicorn Beast and Electric Bear. Squawk! Flaming Cloud Crow appeared in mid-air, covered in flaming feathers. The Water Unicorn Beast called, Nay Nay. Electric Bear. Electric Bear was stuffing food into its mouth. Howl! Sob, sob, sob. Su Hao was rendered speechless. He observed the Electric Bear. It had gained 2 more pounds compared to a few weeks ago. Its strength had also increased significantly. Have you mastered the meat-bouncing thunder ball? Howl howl. All right. In fact, he had already seen it on the interface information. He just felt that he had to ask it personally. It was like checking homework. He then commanded the 3 sprites to utilize their signature unique skills and secret techniques. He looked at the raging fire figure in the sky. Su Hao nodded slightly. Flaming Cloud Crow, we can almost arrange for it to evolve. After it evolves, it can step into a phase where its strength can increase rapidly. only missing the heart of the sun. He had gotten it back when he was at the Sprite Cultivator Cup. Chapter 185, The Growth of the Little Friends. The heart of the sun was exchanged in school. It cost 600 credits and a Class B exchange certificate. One word, expensive. Even if he accepted missions on the school platform, it would take him a month to accumulate the amount needed if he couldn't find any high-value missions. But Suhao was a busy person. He was busy contracting sprites, participating in the Sprite Cultivator Cup, and settling the construction of the laboratory. He didn't have time to take on those wanted missions. There was no need to either. Whale Island University's representative team had won the championship for the Sprite Cultivator Cup. Suhao wasn't the team leader, but he had the highest contribution points. The rewards he received were very generous. Reward, 3 million. It was considered a basic reward. It would be strange if most students didn't value it. Only experts and masters who weren't short of money didn't care about a mere few million yuan. Apart from money, the organizers also gave each of them a set of rare books. Great works written by grandmasters and masters that may not even exist in Whale Island University's library. When he got the book, he was even instructed not to share with others. Suhao was even more satisfied. This meant that it was full of exclusive experience and knowledge. Then, there was the support for his experiments. Lin Suiguang had also received some funds. He planned to build a temporary team and carry out a special experiment after returning to school. The above were the official rewards for the Sprite Cultivator Cup. Whale Island University also rewarded them with credits. Suhao received 2,000 credits and 1 Class A exchange roll. Awesome! There are credits again. But the bulk of the rewards he received weren't these. It was the reward from the thesis Spirit Power Solidification. This thesis not only shocked the entire Dragon Nation's sprite cultivation world, but its influence and sensationalism far exceeded the discovery of the Reverie butterfly evolution pathway back then. It was just that the news didn't spread widely. Spirit power solidification and spiritual force solidification were techniques that could only be learned at the mid to high levels. It wouldn't be announced to the public. There were no interviews either. At first, there were, but they were rejected by Master Yao's suggestion, and lowered its popularity. Suhao thought about it and agreed. The external environment wasn't safe enough, it was better to keep a low profile. Although our light is too bright, I'm just afraid it can't be hidden anymore. But now, he more or less had some self-protection abilities. When dealing with ordinary elite levels, his sprite could KO them with 2 slashes, not too bad. At most, he wouldn't go anywhere out of the New World City anymore. In any case, he didn't lack resources for the time being. Suhao counted the rewards from the thesis. You can choose 5 rare treasures. The item list is even higher quality than back then. There was a heart of attributes inside, a complete one. There was also the heart of the sun that he needed. As for the others, he coveted a lot of them, but he didn't need them for the time being. Suhao kept the opportunity to claim them in the future when he needed it. Apart from treasures, the paper on spirit power consolidation also brought in subsequent income. It was similar to selling improved unique skills. If someone bought it, there would be benefits. But the percentage was not that high. The officials took the bulk. He took a small portion of the profits. Dragon City University could also get some. Their early work contributions couldn't be denied. Without the directions given by Dragon City University and the opinions of the other masters, I wouldn't have hit the unlocking requirements. Besides, without the platform provided by Dragon Nation, I can't sell it even if I have the technology. The solidification of spirit power is also a high-end knowledge. Even if it's just a little, it's still a lot of money. Many universities will probably introduce it in the early stages. By then, there will be a large sum of income. Suhao was already very satisfied. One shouldn't be too greedy and be content. He logged into his account in the Union. Name, Su Hao. Authority, Level 8. Level, High-level Sprite Cultivator, Elite-level Sprite Trainer. During the winter break of his third year in high school, he had a Level 4 authority. Before the Sprite Cultivator Cup, he had a Level 5 authority. But now, his mandate went from Level 5 to Level 8 in one go, even higher than that of many master-level Sprite trainers. High Authority was speaking on the Union Forum, shining brightly. Su Hao felt a little ashamed. Apart from that, many limited edition items were open to him. For example, he could buy the Heart of Attributes with money. 12 million yuan each. However, he needed to make an appointment, and he could buy up to 3 a year. He didn't look at anything else. I heard that high authorization still has many conveniences, but I'm just an ordinary, slightly special first-year student after all, I can't come into contact with them. At the villa, Butterfly leaned against the sofa and continued to practice the spiritual orb. The 3 white orbs were triangular and fixed on its small head, near its antennae. Like a white hat's. Under it sat a jade-like treasure. The treasure was about the size of 2 fingers, and its color was similar to a pearl. It was the marrow jade that could nurture spirit power. It was considered a pretty precious treasure. It didn't lose to the Heart of the Sunday. Su Hao remembered that it was given to the little rascal by a master surnamed Wang. The marrow jade was kept close to its body, and Butterfly was constantly strengthening the spiritual orb. Its spirit powers improved significantly every day. I'm going out. If you have time, supervise the playful bear more, in case it doesn't know what to do again. Gurgle. Butterfly waved. Su Hao closed the door of the villa, summoned the water unicorn beast that was strolling in the garden, and got on the horse. Neigh. The water unicorn beast raised its hooves and charged into the sky step by step. It was winter again. The cold wind blew. Su Hao rode the water unicorn beast to the regular battlefield and arranged to meet his 3 friends here. Just like in high school. The difference was that everyone had grown a lot, and wearing short sleeves was no longer his specialty. Li Songting was wearing a loose set of clothes, and the muscles on his exposed arm were tight. Lu Ren still had a pancake face. He was wearing casual clothes, but one could actually vaguely see some muscles. Gulan Jiao's hair was tied up, and she was even wearing a simple and practical usage suit. Su Hao took a few glances. Fortunately, he didn't see any muscles. But she also had a more mighty and valiant temperament. It was from participating in missions to catch wanted criminals. On the other hand, Su Hao glanced at himself. Ever since he had the water unicorn beast, he had abandoned the shared bicycle and had less running training. He actually couldn't see any muscles on himself at all. Perhaps it was because he was too handsome that his muscles weren't as obvious. Seeing him appear riding the water unicorn beast, Lu Ren waved and shouted. Old Su, let's have a hot-blooded battle. Su Hao was rendered speechless. He looked at Li Songting, then at Lu Ren, and silently took 2 steps back. Afraid of being assimilated. We're going to fight together today, you don't mind, right? Gulan Jiao said, my Lingling has already evolved, you might lose. Gulan Jiao's tide-calling spring sprite had grown to become a little taller than her. The long dress made of water streams dragged on the ground. It pressed its palms together, and a sky blue gem hung around its neck. Water gem. It was a tool similar to marrow jade. Yes. She said, there was a lucky draw activity for old customers at Green Shade Supermarket some time ago. Then, I got it. There's also a box of spiritual jades. Su Hao was rendered speechless. There's even lucky draws now? On the battlefield. On the opposite side, the lava dragon turtle, the master hound, and the tide-calling spring sprite stood side by side. Su Hao stood there. Under the water unicorn beast's expectant gaze, he said. In that case, the sprite I chose to fight is Flaming Cloud Crow. Squawk! With a cry, the flaming cloud crow arrived per the summon. Sparks flew. Its red feathers were bright and shiny. Even if it wasn't in its flaming feather form, circles of redness spread out from its body. But it hasn't evolved yet. Lu Ren thought to himself. His lava dragon turtle had just evolved, and the tactical system recommended by Old Su was also completed. It was the moment its battle power had increased sharply. It was the moment the difference in battle power between the two parties was the smallest. The best opportunity to defeat Old Su is today.